Joining us live, author and broadcaster and podcaster Sam Delaney and CEO of the Talk About Trust, Helena Conibear. Good to have you both on the programme. Why don't we start with Sam? Hi, Sam. So nice to see you. I've missed you hugely.
Hi, Vanessa.
Lovely to see your
I missed
handsome
you
and
too.
delightful face. Tell me about this, because very often, whatever the subject is that we discuss, it's always poorer children, less privileged children in more poverty-stricken regions of the country who suffer the worst for whatever it is we're talking about. This seems to be a notable exception. This is the children of affluent parents who are succumbing to the allure of drink so soon. What's going wrong there then?
Well, I mean, perhaps part of the reason is that drink is extremely expensive. There was a report out yesterday by BMJ in which it sort of outlined the fact that the key reason for people giving up any of their vices nowadays, whether that's cigarettes, alcohol, or junk food, is the expense. We're in a cost of living crisis, and these things that used to be affordable sort of cheeky treats when we were younger are now full-blown luxury products. You can't go out to a pub. We used to sneak into pubs when I was young. That's not possible now unless you've got serious financial backing, whether you're a child or an adult. So I think really, in many ways, it's just prohibitively expensive to drink alcohol for children who aren't from the very wealthiest of family homes and get a lot of pocket money and what have you.
People do love any kind of story, Sam, that has a headline ingredient, affluent parents, middle class, whether it's middle class drug users or middle class drinkers. It always gives an extra fillip to a story. People love it. So what we're supposed to think about this is partly that it's wealthy parents who are heavy drinkers themselves who say, go on, George, have a little tipple. This is a bit of dad's poison, finish off the gin and tonic or whatever it is. And the children are absurdly young, get a taste for it, and it all kicks in there. Is that what we're meant to think is happening?
Yeah, I think that maybe there's a cliche that, middle-class children are served a glass of red wine in that very sort of Gallic way. We're told the French have been at it for years, regardless of class. And that in middle-class homes, that's the sort of thing that happens. I mean, I don't drink myself, but I do allow my teenage daughter to drink. And to be honest, she's 16. I have bought her alcohol before when she's asked me to, because I'm sort of a believer in the fact that if you make these things completely taboo, you might be more likely to push rebellious teenagers towards them. Perhaps that is middle-class sort of liberal sensibilities getting the better of me here. I hope I'm right, but it's not the environment I grew up in. I grew up in an environment where I wasn't encouraged to drink, but I did drink a huge amount anyway, and it became a problem for me in my 30s. So I'm not quite sure what the best approach is. But I do think that, certainly nowadays, there's a lot of parents who grew up in the 90s, which is a very hedonistic time. And therefore, we're now parents of kids who are reaching adolescence, and we compare them to our own youth. And I think certainly my wife and I, neither of whom drink, sort of look at our own kids and their friends and think, oh, that's nothing in comparison to the way we lived when we were their age, right? And so therefore, the bar is set pretty high, and you therefore don't worry so much about your kids and their hedonistic tendencies because you think, well, it can't possibly be as bad as what we were up to at their age. And perhaps as a result, we take our eye off the ball somewhat because we're setting the benchmark by our own habits, which were back in those days in the 80s and 90s, really seriously unhealthy and ill-advisable.
Let me bring Helena into all of this. Helena, good to have you on the programme. Obviously, it's an issue, and our children are drinking more than children almost everywhere else in the world. Is it a middle-class parental failure? Is it a kind of, blasé nonchalance about drink because drink is so sort of deftly woven into every single occasion that anybody's ever involved with, a celebration, a funeral, a divorce, a sports fixture? People are just drinking at all times, all through the week, that we think it's normal, therefore they think it's normal.
I would hate to simplify what is a very serious issue into it being a middle class thing. I mean, these statistics look at all young people when they're aged 11, 13 and 15. What I would say about those 11-year-olds and 13-year-olds, it's ever having tried more than a sip of alcohol. So not drinking on a regular basis, but it's still unacceptable for a parent to think that an 11-year-old should be able to have a sip or a certain amount of alcohol at age 11 or 13.
And just say why, because so many people listening to this will be thinking, well, I did, and I was fine, and you don't want to make a big fetish out of it, and you don't want to make it an unattainable, kind of verboten prohibition era in your house, and everyone's having a drink, and there's nothing wrong with your child. And people see, people in different European countries and all different cultures giving their children sometimes watered down wine, sometimes placating a screaming baby with a tiny drop of cherry brandy, and they all think it's absolutely fine. So when you say it's wrong, why is it wrong?
I'm not saying it's wrong, if you let me finish. So there's a world of difference between an 11 and 13-year-old having a sip or a small amount and whole drinks. But we do have really good guidance in the UK, which is an alcohol-free childhood to the age of 15 is what's recommended by the chief medical officers, and that's because young teenagers' brains are more affected by alcohol, and also their bodies physiologically, we don't have the enzyme that breaks down alcohol, for example, and they are more vulnerable to other risk taking. So it's very sound advice, and what we know is that a younger somebody is when they start experimenting with alcohol or cannabis or vaping, the more likely they are to present with more serious problems before the end of 18. It's the biggest predictor or the biggest vulnerability for needing help with excessive use or requiring treatment by the age of 18. And I wanted to say about this report, it's not just on drinking, it covers vaping, and we've got a particular issue with young women and vaping, young men and cannabis use, and 1 in 4 15-year-old girls have been drunk in the last month. So it's not just about middle-class parents allowing younger children to drink at home, and I would hate to see this debate simplified to just that, really.
No, I've got no interest in simplifying it at all, but every interest in having a debate that's worth having. I'm certainly not here to reduce it to some kind of trite platitude. Definitely not. But in view of the seriousness with which this is being taken, what, if anything, do you at the Talk About Trust recommend doing about it, or indeed not doing about it? What is the constructive action that should or could be taken to stop this, or help it at least?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that underage drinking has declined and is declining. So it's more than halved over the last decade. So this isn't a problem that's getting worse. But this is the first these are the first statistics we've seen sort of post-COVID that might suggest that trend is changing again, and particularly this young age of 11. So first of all, we'd like to engage parents and say, please think about an older age of initiation, that 11 and 13 is too young, and it's not the social norm. Most 13-year-olds are not drinking, so there shouldn't be any social pressure. I'm very pleased that health education at school has been compulsory since 2020, so that's quite new. So every child will learn about sort of alcohol, drugs and nicotine within a health education setting, and that's very good too. The government has made alcohol very hard to buy, but what that means is about 70% of supply of alcohol to under 15s is from parents and carers themselves, and the second most common cause is actually it being taken from home. So it does mean a lot of responsibility is lying with parents and them understanding the effect of early alcohol use or vaping or other substances use. Is very important. So checking things like party arrangements, for example, if they're going off to parties, checking that parents are there, are the arrangements genuine, setting boundaries, knowing where their kids are, what we call tough love parenting. These things can really help.
Sam, I remember Davina McCall saying, she'd had a tussle with drugs herself, and she said that when it came to talking about drugs to her children, she would have to tell the truth, which is, if you do them, you will, for the most part, find it incredibly enjoyable before you don't. It's not going to be something you don't take to. It's going to be something you do take to, and it's not going to be something that is an acquired taste like olives. It's going to be something you acquire a taste for the second you try it. And she said, not exactly those words, which are mine, as you can tell, but nevertheless, she said she would have to be honest honest about it. So I'm wondering how honest you have been with your children about alcohol and your issues with it and the allure and the charm of it and the shine that it can bring to life, which is why people like it so much. And then, of course, the dire destruction it can also bring, which is why people sometimes like it less. What have you said to your children about it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very, very frank and honest about all of my drinking, and particularly about what I tend to do is tell them about why I take such pleasure in not being someone who drinks alcohol now. Therefore, I don't lie to them about some of the fun times I had with alcohol, but I do tell them more about the reasons why I don't drink it, which aren't really just about avoiding the kind of chaos and misery that it caused, but the sort of more enjoyable, fulfilling life you can have. And I try to put that kind of spin on it, because that's, to be honest, the way that I feel about alcohol. I don't feel like I sort of gave anything up or sacrificed anything in my life. I felt that I sort of got my life back, and I sort of, if anything, kind of regret a lot of the experiences that I might have enjoyed in a more profound way.
You say you're glad you've done it, absolutely, but how difficult was it? And have there been many occasions since where you've heard it calling to you and calling your name, and where you've thought, my God, what I normally did at this point was drink, and I want to drink, and having to really kind of have hideous dark nights of the soul? No.
I think, when you first give up alcohol, if you've been drinking quite regularly, then there's obviously a physical reaction, and anyone who drinks heavily should, to give up alcohol under supervision, because it can be quite dangerous physically. But that's something that only exists for the first sort of week or two. After that, if you're, my own personal approach, and it's different for everyone, was, okay, what am I gaining here? And what I gained was a huge amount of clarity, a huge amount of energy, a huge amount of interest and enthusiasm in things that I just hadn't had before. And so I embraced life in a way that was much more fulfilling and exciting. I didn't sacrifice any of the fun or any of the interesting things that I did before I was sober. I continued to hang around my mates. I continued to go to football matches. I continued to go to live music. The truth was, I just enjoyed them all more because I could sort of experience it more vividly. And I tried to just focus on that with my kids. And I think so far it's helped. I mean, my son's 12. He's never tasted alcohol in his life. And he says now he never will. But, we'll see whether that turns out to be true. My daughter's 16, she likes to drink at the weekend. He needs to
sign up to the pledge, absolutely, of perpetual abstinence, and not just from alcohol, all sorts of other things as well that are incredibly enjoyable. All of them. Thank you both very much indeed for joining me on the programme. Lovely.